Okay, so this would be a feedback slash critique for WhiteTiger2k99. Did you change it? I always thought it was 2k20. You know the drill by now. I'm just a nerd who likes Tekken, and I like Feng. I think Feng's really fun, and it's really cool, right? I am by no means a professional at this game. I'm just simply saying, here's where I think you can improve on, right? And take what I say into consideration, but take it with a grain of salt, or vice versa. Take it with a grain of salt, but take it into consideration. All I'm really doing here is posting up food for thought. Excuse me. So, oh, it is 2k20. I guess he changed it to 2k9. Whatever. Okay, so right off the bat, why are you backing away so much, right? Not necessarily, I don't think the issue is necessarily like, oh, how dare you back away, but I think it's like the degree of the space you're giving up on is kind of an issue, because take a look at what happens as the seconds pass by, right? The Dragunov is starting to close in. He's trying to like bait something out of you, see how willing you are to like play keep out or do something or throw out a button. And then as it progresses, right, he's just, all he's doing is just advancing forward, and then you're basically backing yourself into a corner, right? The wall is really close behind you. The Dragunov is now getting more in range, where something like instant wall running 2, even with its notoriously shitty hitbox now, it can still like clip you if you're not prepared to move against this move, right? A lot of people are afraid of instant wall running 2 for good reason. And a lot of it, people are like, oh, it tracks you really well or something. And it doesn't. You can actually move around the move a lot more now than you could before. But obviously if you haven't practiced it, then it's a different story. But the key point being is you were too passive in the early stages, and you've now kind of backed yourself into a corner of like, okay, well, the drag can at any point just do instant wall running 2, and then, you know, your back is to the wall. You're now -6 against force crouch. I think it forces crouch against drag. Not the best situation to be in, right? So something to consider is that, like, okay, in the early rounds, what can you do to maintain safety but still gain information, right? The entire time that this round is happening, you're not really gaining information on your opponent. You are and you aren't, right? You are gaining information because you're seeing that the Dragunov isn't approaching you as much, right? He's also playing cautiously. He's still trying to feel out what type of player you are, right? But at the same time, you're not doing anything to sort of start formulating a game plan, right? What does he do if you do down back 3? What does he do if you start sidestepping? Does he immediately duck? Look at his movement, right? Is he doing backdash into low parry after your moves? Right here is a crucial time for you to start being on the lookout for what is your opponent not doing, and what is your opponent doing and not doing, right? What can you do to take advantage of something and to, you know, formulate your offense, right? Which tools in your bag of tricks are you going to use now? So stuff to consider is, you know, start dash blocking a bit more, right? And then and at certain points, don't be afraid to throw out a move. And obviously don't start like throwing out a bunch of down forward 4-3 or something, right? Something with like really long whiff recovery, and, you know, don't start tossing out shoulders, but doing something more to kind of be like, what have I got to work with here, right? And I can kind of understand where you're coming from. I'm generally someone who does believe that like online is too stupid aggressive. People just run into your shit all day, every day. But you do run into those people that are, you know, they're a bit more cautious. And so these are definitely the people that you need to be practicing against. Basically, all right, I'm facing someone who might not be a turtle, but they're showing elements of it, right? They're being very passive on their defense, and they're very cautious in their approach. So what do you do against that, right? I mean, the answer is dash blocking and some other stuff, but yeah. Let's keep going. Right. So then, randomly thrown out move, whatever it was, maybe it was a jab. Was it a jab? Yeah, it looks like it was a jab. And then instant wall running 2. Or, you know, drag running 2 does its usual thing. And now you're knocked down at the wall against drag. Right? It's kind of awkward. Not the Not the greatest place to be. That was good. So, an interesting thing you do is, I guess, the kind of... you do this a lot, right? Where it's like, alright, I'm under pressure, parry, right? Or a lot of, like, 1+2, whatever, or insert Sabaki or parry that Feng has here. And that's something you gotta be careful for, is I think you gotta start developing that matchup knowledge of, like, is this a situation where you need the parry or reversal to abuse a gap in the opponent's string because they're punching you or something? Or is this someone where it's like, no, if you just duck, you would have been fine, and then you could then punish in a different way? What does he do? So, right, he cancels in your face, but then he could, if he wanted to, he could easily just whiff punish you with the parry. And so that's something you got to be careful of kind of like, when you overcommit to a move, and in parries and reversals, they are a move, right? You press the button and there's a whiff recovery involved and all this other stuff. You're opening yourself up to more risk than you need to, right? If the Dragunov was a bit like more patient or sharper, he's just going to down forward to you. So and then there's a lot, a lot of 1+2, and Dragunov does have an okay 12 frame punish. So it's these things of like, you got to be careful with autopiloting these moves, because you're not only are exposing yourself at more risk than you need to, it's also kind of like you're creating more work for yourself when you could have just blocked and then exposed a gap, but you're also giving your opponent too much opportunity for free damage, right? Oh, I guess I should talk about this, because I guess there was a discussion about that, right? Like the snake edge thing. Okay, so we can see from the frame data that Dragunov snake edge is 27 frames, right? Snake edges are reactable, right? Especially once you get past that 24 frame mark, right? Any 23, 24 frames, like Heihachi down back 2, people are like, oh yeah, Heihachi has no lows, but then down back 2 has that audio mix up and all this other bullshit. It's kind of annoying. The problem with the reactable conversation is that people are like, oh, X thing is reactable, and it's like, yes, in a vacuum, in training mode, when there's nothing else going on, these moves are reactable. Online, in the heat of the match, there's a lot of other factors to be taken into consideration. One, have you actually practiced reacting and blocking to this move, right? Some people you'll tell them that it's reactable and they'll be like, all right, cool, and then they're good to go, right? They'll be on the lookout for it, they'll remember what that animation looks like, and they're just ready to block every single snake edge in existence. And other people, they need to practice it. They need to, be aware of the audio cue, be aware of the specific animation, and just block. So, and then you also have to factor in, is it online or offline, right? Online fucks everything up. And a frame or two of lag can fuck up your reaction, and then suddenly what's normally 27 frames is now like 25, 24. And then not literally, but figuratively, it's literally figuratively speaking, you have a less time to react, because even though you're reacting properly, this garbage games online just fucks you over, right? Prepare yourself, right? He has a snake edge. He has strings that cancel into the snake edge, right? Only like one, and it's really a meme string. But if you're not, again, if you're not aware of it, and if you're not ready for it, it can catch you off guard, right? So you should be practicing against this. You should be, just hitting the lab and being like, I am never gonna fucking die to this snake edge ever again, right? And then for some reason, this blue rank Dragunov is going to snake edge you, and then you'll just block and do the late hop kick. And that's really just, I don't want to like harp on this much more longer than I have. It's really just things, something being reactable is not just hey, that's reactable and then you're good to go, right? You still need to build up and practice it, right? Think about something that's like punishable, right? But when you started, were you punishing every -13 situation that you became aware of instantly with shoulder, right? Not necessarily, right? These are things that you have to start practicing and building up that muscle memory and being ready for it. Especially because there's the first muscle memory of just blocking the move, and then there's that second layer of muscle memory of doing a delayed hop kick versus just wall standing 3. Because it's a world of damage. It's a whole world of damage. You know, the difference is huge, right? Starting with a 13 damage launcher versus starting with the 23 damage launcher, right? So all these are factors to consider, and you just really gotta bite the bullet. And if you don't want to lose to snake edges, you gotta start practicing against them. Even then, there's some bullshit ones like fucking Miguel's snake edge sweep or whatever. I shit you not, that animation is so subtle. I hate it. But now we're getting into a different territory. Anyway, I've said my piece. Yeah, snake edges are reactable, but there are other factors to consider, and you got to practice the punish, right? Doesn't matter if it's reactable if you don't punish properly. Then keep in mind, this is coming from me, and I've gotten stagger blocks before and done like wall standing 4, right? Happens to everybody, but I'm just letting you know, hey, this is what you should be doing. Nice. So right here, I think, remember to, I'm like, God, it's been forever. Down forward 4, 1 plus 2, right? Right there is where you stop the combo, and then you start doing shifting clouds Oki. When you finish the combo, the opponent's way too far for shifting clouds to do anything, right? They're not going to be put in any 50-50. They're not going to attack roll into any situation. They're just super far away. And then if you do shifting clouds in their face, you're putting yourself at risk. So remember to adjust your Oki for situations, for the context of the situation, right? You're not worried about a wall. You're not going to hit a wall anytime soon. So here is where you go, okay, I'm going to stop this string at the second hit and then do shifting clouds like the setup is. Right, like you don't want to be running into that. And that's another thing, right? So like look here. Previously in this situation, when he does like this cancel, I guess it's the sneak cancel, he goes for a throw. And you break the throw. Good. But remember that, did you break the throw? Or does the reversal that you put in input? No, you pressed 1. Oh, I guess you're pressing back 1. Oh, that's so funny. Right, so this is a situation where just doing like a 1 plus 2 or a punch parry is not going to get you out of it. You have to start thinking about what does your opponent like to do in this situation, and what is your corresponding answer to it, right? So it's again, the reason I harp on try to avoid relying too much on sabakis and punch parries is because in certain situations they're the clean answer. In these ambiguous situations, they carry more risk than it's worth, right? And so you got to be careful. But let's keep going. Nice. Jeez. Okay, so I get that I talked about like, hey, you know, be more aggressive at your opening start, but I'm not sure what was motivating the side step 4. What did the second round look like? Yeah, so I kind of get that, like you both do the side step, but I think honestly I'm not a huge fan of side step 4's hitbox, right? The clean hit. Honestly, even if, well, maybe if you did side step 4 it would clean hit, but I think it's a big commitment that you didn't need to do, right? So based on this situation, you know at least two possible options. The Dragunov is just going to backdash, which completely fucks over sidestep 4, or he's going to sidestep with you, at which point you are relying on sidestep 4's clean hit, which any Feng will tell you, without conditioning your opponent first to make sure that you are respecting, you know, that your opponent is respecting you or afraid to start moving around, sidestep 4's clean hit might as well be a coin flip, right? Just as much as it's a 50-50 from sidestep, the opponent has to guess blocking low or high. It's a 50-50 on your end of like, oh, am I gonna get the clean hit or not, right? So you got to be careful with that. Avoid these big commitments until you have a better understanding and conditioning of your opponent. Right, so you whiff the move and then immediately do a backswing blow, and I think it's like you just got to be careful. Right, just as much as I've seen people just do backswing blow into backswing blow often to success, I've seen just as much people do backswing blow. It gets blocked because the opponent just blocks and then they die. Again, you are putting yourself on a lot of risk, and in this situation it doesn't matter. Both of you are at full life. It's not really gonna matter as much. But the problem isn't necessarily when you're doing the move. The problem is like I guess part of the problem is when you're doing the move. It's just that using the move in the first place, to me, says when you're in a less favorable situation, you're also gonna rely on backswing blow, and it is just as likely to get you killed more than anything, right? So you got to be careful there. Whatever you're doing, okay. When you block this move, maybe someone with more Dragunov experience will chime in and, you know, be like, oh, well, here are these situations where you want to start sidestepping. But for the most part, you do not press here, right? You are -6. Even without the frame data display, you can tell that you blocked a running move and your turn's over, right? Your turn's not happening in a while. So this is where you have to start to be like, okay, what type of move is he gonna do? What is he going to do? And then you start tailoring your response, right? But challenging it right away is risky business, right? It ended up working out fine. He did some like low commitment check, and he wasn't really trying to press his advantage that much. But at any point, right, he presses, he's +6. He can press, Dragunov has it down forward too, right? He can press down forward too, and it will beat every single option you have, right? Your punch parries are not going to come out in time. Maybe your punch reversal would. I don't know. But most of your fast options, like back one's not going to come out on time, jab's not going to come out on time, etc., etc., etc. Right? So stuff to consider of kind of like, yes, simply being at -6 isn't always going to mean, you know, just give up your turn, just wait, right? There's gonna be some situations where you're like, I'm gonna mash out of this, and you'll be fine. But in order to get to that place, you need to first see what your opponent does after they are at +6, and then you can kind of gain more information about knowing when to challenge your opponent, right? The whole like operator mashing under pressure, right? It's a real thing. The reason I stress like your turn's over, just give it up, is that oftentimes people are just mashing without any context to back up their reasoning, right? It's usually just like, I'm under pressure, I'm just gonna press a button, and it's like, you can do that, or you just wait a little bit, gain some more information on your opponent, what their habits are, what their moves like to do, right? Because if you instead mash something like hop kick, you would have just launched this guy, and he would have been like, wow, this fucker's just launching hop kick. But at which you would respond, it's like, I'm launching hop kick because you do lows after wall running too. So if I keep seeing lows, I'm gonna hop kick, right? Like, what do you expect to happen, right? So the default, in my opinion, just give up your turn, just see what your opponent does, and then once you have more knowledge of what your opponent likes to do, then by all means, you know, mash whatever move you think is gonna work based on the context of the situation. And why, right? So previously you just blocked a wall running 2 and then you just duck in his face and then immediately do wall standing 3. And it's kind of like, why, right? Ducking, maybe you're trying to bait out the wall running 2 and you would have hit him out of it. I still think it's kind of more risk than necessary, right? But let's just be like, see what happens. Nice. Wait, does that actually... Do you have a 14 frame launcher? No. Okay, you were just pressing something. Right, so you should have just blocked. I don't know what you were pressing, but Dragunov should not have been able to launch you, right? His wall standing 2 is 15 frames. Core circle forward 1 unless it's... Wait. Yeah, I'm not crazy. He's only plus 14. Right, so whatever you... Yeah, and then there's the counter hit. So, wait, what did you press? Oh, God, why is it so blurry? 720p. YouTube. Okay. So you press core circle forward 1. Oh, you were trying to press back 1? Or you're just trying to backdash and he clipped you? So yeah, just hold back to block. You gotta wait out on that. I don't know what you were pressing, but you're minus 14. It's not gonna beat whatever he wants to do. Nice. Okay, so what happened here, right? Why the immediate... What reason does the Dragunov have to duck right here, right now? What have you been doing that would incentivize the Dragunov to duck? Right? You're not doing down back 3 anymore. You're not doing any of that, right? So I think the shoulder was, way too much risk. But it's fine. Nobody punishes shoulder online anyway. I always thought that move was launch punishable. I guess it's only minus 14. Unfortunate. Oh, yeah, you're dead. That was pretty scary. Yeah, okay. So let's do the usual neutral punishment slash matchup knowledge combo slash Oki personal opinion stuff. Neutral. You need to structure your offense a bit better, right? You're using a lot of tools that aren't necessarily bad, but are also not necessarily good in the situations you're using them, right? I'm talking about like the random shoulder call out, the wall standing 3 call out. Excuse me. The random, not random, but just kind of like when you use sidestep 4 and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, okay, but Feng has clear pressure options, right? You got sidestep, yeah, I'd consider sidestep 2 pressure because it's pretty decently plus. Sidestep 2, right? Core circle forward 1 plus 2. What else? You have slash kick, that's kind of there. That's kind of whatever. Don't even worry about that as much. Right? But you have tools and that enable you safe frame advantage without too much risk, right? And you need to be utilizing those tools a lot more. You need to force the opponent into situations where they are either respecting you, right? Not everybody's going to mash after core circle for 1+2. Some of them are going to try and like, oh, let me move around a little bit here and there. And it's like, okay. But that is more information that you have to work with, right? Like you can then start doing down back 3, start doing down forward 1+2, right? Etc. etc. Once you start seeing that they like to move around after core circle forward 1+2. Stuff like that. There's no current structure to your game plan, right? What are you doing and why? What is the reasoning behind you pressing punch parries or sabakis or something like that, right? And there's also just not a lot of poking, right? You do like 1 or 2 down back 3s and then that's it, right? And I feel like you should be abusing that move way more, right? The move is an unseeable low. Yes, obviously doing down back 3, and obviously the move's launch punishable, but doing down back 3 into down back 3 versus sprinkling out your down back 3s throughout the match to constantly keep the Dragunov on edge is a very different scenario, right? If the opponent blocks the unseeable low, that is your fault, not the low's fault, right? And yeah, sometimes they'll get a lucky block and shit happens, but for the 80 to 90% of the time, they're not going to be ready for it. They're not going to be on the lookout. They're not going to be instantly blocking your down back 3s, right? The move is unseeable. Additionally, doing something like core circle forward 1, right? Because he's not really low parrying you that often. He's not really blocking low that often. And if he does, he tries to do while standing 2, which doesn't work, right? It is arguable that you don't want to be doing this because Dragunov has a decent 13. He has both a decent 12 and 13 frame punish, right? Because he's got the wall standing 1-3 and he's got the shoulder check, right? That's a pretty chunky punish on core circle forward 1. But I still think you should be using the move a bit more, right? Before you start doing sidestep 4, you need to start using your other less committal lows in order to incentivize the Dragunov to start ducking, to start trying to like low parry, etc. Right? I'm diving into personal pain stuff. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, neutral. Structure your game plan a bit more, right? What is a tool that you like using that leaves you in a good position? Something like sidestep 2, because yeah, sidestep 2 is a high, and it leaves you +2 at back turn, which isn't a crazy amount, but it's about the slipperiness of back turn, right? Even if the Dragunov tries to do instant wall running 2, I don't think he'll be able to catch you if you do sidestep 2 and then hold down back in order to escape, right? Or if he starts to chase you, your back turn, so you just press down 3 and then counter hit him, right? For easy launch. So, or you start doing core circle forward 1+2 because you're like, this move's a headbutt that leaves me decently plus, and I'm gonna start doing that, right? And then tailor your offense accordingly. Don't just start, overcommitting to like these setups that work against far more aggressive opponents. Down forward 4-3 into 1+2 isn't the worst idea in the world, right? It worked out clearly, but he's someone who's clearly a bit more patient. And it's really this archetype of player that I see, that in my opinion, I think you're going to struggle with in the future. Someone who's a bit more patient, who's not going to be pressing into your punch parry setups, and then what do? Right? You have to apply pressure in other ways. And if there is one character that can make an opponent's mental stack unbearable, it's Feng, right? The dude has a million ways to attack you, right? He will always make you second guess what you're trying to do when you're trying to do it, and you got to leverage that strength to your advantage. Simply relying on like a reversal or other such setup, it's not going to work out in your favor, right? Other aspects of neutral. Just a lot more poking and a lot more like less commitment, right? Don't just do down forward 4-3. Do something like down forward 4 and see what the Dragunov likes to do. What other aspects of neutral? No, everything else in my head is coming off into like personal opinion stuff. So I'll talk about that later. Punishment / matchup knowledge. I talked about the snake edge stuff. I talked about like, hey, you just gotta learn Dragunov strings and start punishing them. Another thing to consider is that you have to kind of like when you're facing a more passive opponent, right, how you have to start experimenting. How much can you get away with? Is this opponent just going to let me run up and do core circle forward 1+2? Is this opponent going to let me dash block in and do core circle forward 1, right? And start experimenting with, how can I apply pressure to my opponent without relying on overly risk, like, let me rephrase this. How can you apply pressure to your opponent at minimal risk? And that's the key word here, is minimal, right? Yeah, you can do down forward forward 3 into 1+2, but you know, if the opponent just chooses to block like the Dragunov did once or twice, all of a sudden you're just putting yourself in a -12 situation for no reason. But you know, leveraging your tools, right? Take this as someone who like plays Paul, Paul doesn't have a lot of like crazy plus on block stuff. Obviously, core circle forward, core circle back 4 is crazy. It's a crazy good move, right? But being +1 is whatever, right? Should the move be plus? Probably not. I mean, but Paul's main terms of creating like frame traps or pressure are non-existent outside of punishment scenarios, right? He's got sidestep 3, he's got back 4, and he's got forward 1+2. And of those, right? Of those, like, if the opponent blocks, what happens? He's really got core circle back 4, and he's got forward 1+2. But you still utilize those moves a lot because they're still putting your opponent in a disadvantageous situation, right? And they either let me keep pressing those buttons, or they do something to challenge it, and I use that knowledge against them later on, right? Like if I press Paul forward 1+2, and I know my opponent's gonna press a button, it's not like a dick jab or some other high crush, I just press back 1 and nothing's beating me, right? There's no move on this earth that doesn't, there is no non-high crushing move on this earth that's going to beat back 1 after the opponent blocks forward 1+2. I'm going to rambling territory, but you get what I mean, right? It's kind of like, even if you do nothing after core circle forward 1+2, right? You are still fine because you are +4 to 5, right? The opponent can't do anything, and even the opponent's lack of doing anything is information for you to use. Combos / Oki. I mentioned it once or twice already, but just kind of like, remember to cut your combo, to cut your ender short if you want to go for that Oki option, right? Don't finish the full down forward 4 string, stop at the middle, and then do shifting clouds mix-ups. Other aspects of Oki, something at the wall is like, just start utilizing, if your opponent's on the ground and they stay on the ground, that they're not like tech rolling and they're not just immediately pressing a button or something, right? Just start doing forward forward 3, right? But as they get up into it, they block it, because I don't know, if they're pressing buttons, they're extra dead. But they block it, and then now boom, you're +8 for free, right? If you're at the wall and the opponent is on the ground, you press forward forward 3, right? Shit's either gonna hit grounded, or you just get a free +8 situation. The move is really good. So figuring out situations where you can squeeze that in to, again, create heavily disadvantageous for your for your opponent for basically free, right? Normally I'm like, you know, hold off on the move because it's kind of slow and you don't want to, you know, open yourself up like that. But when your opponent's on the ground and they're not tech rolling or moving out of the way, what the fuck are they gonna do, right? You basically get a free opportunity to be like, hey, I want to be +8, so do it. Combo / Oki. Combo game is solid. I thought your combos were solid. Nothing really to say there. But yeah, just experimenting more with Oki options, and basically like, okay, you're faced with an Oki situation. What is the maximum amount of advantage you can get from it, right? Do you go for a mix-up, or do you go for an easily plus frame situation for further mix-ups? Personal opinion stuff, options that I think are neat, but your mileage may vary. You got to use more jabs, just 1 2 or just 1. Don't finish 1 1 1 2 2 or whatever Feng's string is. Yeah, it's 1 2 2. Don't. 1, leaving you at +1 is perfectly fine. You just do a quick jab and you just keep jabbing your opponent, jabbing your opponent, and seeing what they do in that situation. Do they immediately start ducking to try and like high crush you? Do they try to challenge you or something? And remember that like you can still move around when you're at +1, right? So it's very valuable information in order to create more whiff opportunities, right? The biggest tool in your arsenal with like almost the least amount of risk is movement, right? So just jabbing, leaving yourself at +1, and then sidestepping. And then blocking. If the opponent presses a button, you either whiff punish or you just block punish, etc. Right? You don't want to constantly finishing 1-2-2 because it doesn't leave you at that great of a situation, right? Especially on block. Like on block, this whole string's kind of ass. And then at worst, you can do like 1-2 because you're at -1, and guess what? You can still move around at -1. That's great, right? So again, situations where you get to press a button for free in jab, right? And then you start moving around, seeing what your opponent does, basing your reactions off of that. Something, I think there's a video by JDCR that goes into like, hey, why is a one jab so important, and here's what you do with one jabs. And I would definitely recommend looking into that, just kind of like, how do you maximize a one jab situation. Another video I was actually watching recently was Peter Y. Mouse. He has a video called Optimizing Brian's 1-2 string, and I would also check that out because a 1-2 string is near universal, right? A majority of the cast has a 1-2 string, right? An easy, safe jailing jab string that leaves you at -2, -1 at worst, or -2 at worst. And what do you do in those situations? And I would just watch those videos for food for thought, right? Other moves, more down forward 1, right? Once you've got the opponent ducking, you press down forward 1 for a free, like, hey, I'm gonna check and see what you're doing, and it's a free button. It's another free button press. You're now neutral, and then you can continue into movement, back kenpo, not shifting clouds, but you know what I mean, or up forward 2 if you want, right? Other tools that I think are neat. Down 4. Use a lot more down 4. Think of it as like a free chip damage, right? You have a free unseeable button that says, hey, get free 7 damage. And that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but then you realize there's a full string involved in there. And then you're like, okay, maybe I can do something here, right? You do down 4, down 4, down 4, and then on the 3rd or 4th one, you do down 4, 1+2. And then the opponent pressing something just gets hit, right? It's all stuff to consider, is that a lot of your tools have extensions or other ways to make your opponent second guess, just challenging you straight up, and taking advantage of that. Other options I've already talked about really is, squeeze in forward 4-3 when you can. Be less reliant on down forward 4-3. Just use down forward 4 by itself, and then see what your opponent does, right? Oh, sidestep 2, right? I think Feng's back turn is really scary and really useful, right? But you're not going to be able to utilize it if you never use it and see what your opponent does. I'm not saying right away do sidestep 2 into back turn down 3, right? Do sidestep 2 when you can. Hold down back and see and to escape out of there, and see what your opponent does. Does he try and chase you? Does he press a button? Does he just stand there blocking, etc.? Right? So utilizing back turn a lot more, and experimenting with other entries into it. Other aspects to consider: sidestep 1+2 as well, right? You're left at +1, but it's like a safe. It's a plus on block mid, right? What more do you want? So yeah, just focus on experimenting with tools that you like to use, and see how does your opponent react to them, and how can you build a game plan based on your opponent's reaction, right? Yeah, off the top of my head, that's pretty much all I got, man. And yeah, sorry about oh man, that was the 29th, it was a while ago. I try to get to these when I can. Been busy for a while and just didn't have it in me, but hope it helped. As always, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be more than happy to try and answer them, or just check around the Feng Discord. Everybody's really chill here. So yeah, hope you have a good one, man.